place in Mauritania, and then a little bit about like coordination between South Africa and Mauritania.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais malheureusement vous parler en français. Et si vous permettez, je vais demander à mon collègue de faire la traduction au besoin. Si vous ne voyez pas d'inconvénient, naturellement. Permettez-moi d'abord de vous présenter mon pays. Comme vous savez, la Mauritanie est un pays ouest-africain. Il se situe au nord du Sénégal et à l'ouest du Mali. Et il a une côte de 700 km sur l'Atlantique. Ce pays d'une superficie de plus d'1 million de kilomètres carrés, avec une densité de population de l'ordre de 4,5 par kilomètre carré, mais essentiellement, l'écrasante majorité de la population est située dans la bande sud. Donc, ce pays, dans la partie nord, dispose d'un potentiel minier très important, où il y a à peu près 900 indices miniers. Il y a à peu près 900 indices miniers. Et dans cette zone qui se trouve au nord, il dispose d'un potentiel d'énergie renouvelable relativement important en termes de aussi bien solaire qu'éolien. À titre d'exemple, la vitesse moyenne du vent dans la zone nord se situe aux alentours de 10 mètres par seconde, ce qui est relativement important. Donc, c'est pour vous dire que nous avons un potentiel relativement important d'énergie renouvelable et donc d'hydrogène vert, green hydrogen, en raison justement de tout ce potentiel. Nous avons aussi des superficies extrêmement importantes où la densité de population est très faible, pour ne pas dire elle est de l'ordre de 0, par kilomètre carré. Nous avons déjà une position géographique relativement importante, aussi bien par rapport au marché européen qu'au marché de l'autre côté de l'Atlantique. Et tout cela fait que la Mauritanie est une orientation pour l'ensemble des grands producteurs ou des personnes, que ce soit des personnes morales ou physiques qui s'intéressent au développement de l'hydrogène. Dans ce cadre, nous avons déjà 4 conventions avec 4 grands opérateurs dans le domaine de l'hydrogène, CWP, BP, Total et Chariot avec Masdar et d'autres. Nous sommes actuellement en train d'élaborer un cadre juridique pour permettre d'encadrement juridique de l'ensemble de cette activité. Ce cadre juridique est en phase finale et il se caractérise par l'institution d'un organisme de régulation qui est une autorité et qui est de nature à rassurer davantage les investisseurs en les mettant en contrepoids contre le gouvernement et l'administration pour rassurer davantage ces investisseurs. Nous avons donc un potentiel important. Il est certes qu'on fait face à un certain nombre de défis, au même titre qu'au niveau africain. Nous faisons face au manque d'infrastructures essentielles qui accompagnent.
And I'll come back to the challenges in a second. But you mentioned about what you have in Mauritania. But Mauritania wants to export that hydrogen into Europe, and clearly we need policies in Europe and framework in Europe to enable that export from Africa to Europe. So what would you like to see in terms of policies in Europe to help you export hydrogen into Europe?
L'objectif, effectivement, de par sa position géographique, on se positionne très bien par rapport à l'exportation, mais nous avons aussi un potentiel minier extrêmement important qui peut être, où la seule entrave à son exploitation, c'est justement un problème d'énergie dans cette zone. Donc, nous avons déjà quelques conventions avec des opérateurs miniers pour faire de l'acier vert green iron, green steel. Et donc, on se positionne non seulement pour l'exportation, mais aussi pour une utilisation locale et pourquoi pas aussi par rapport à tout ce qui est accès universel à l'énergie, notamment dans la zone sud du pays et en Afrique.
Really, there's a lot of exciting policies being put in place, regulatory framework, legal framework being put in place in both countries, South Africa and Mauritania, and some other countries in Africa. But at the same time, technology and innovation will play a big role in bringing costs down. So moving from policy to now technology and innovation, I would like to bring in Dr. Solomon, your perspective on how you see the cost evolve over the next 20 years or 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, so I think that over the next 20 years, the cost of green hydrogen production is going to go down. And this is largely going to be driven by the cost of renewable energy. So if you look at the levelized cost of electricity, for example, from PV, but also from wind, and you look at the trajectory in the last 20 years. So this has shown very obvious downward trend, and we think that this is also going to continue. So the large part of the cost reduction that we would see in green hydrogen production will be driven by the cost of renewable energy. So and then of course, over time too, there's going to be a cost downward trend in the cost of electrolyzers that, like we see, that will be driven, that would also add to the overall cost reduction. And that's why if you look at the projections, so the cost of a kilogram of hydrogen, for example, 2025, and then compared to the cost of a kilogram of hydrogen by 2050, you see in some instances like 40% drop in the price. So the large, like I said, the large part of this will be driven by the cost of renewable energy, but also added also to by the cost reduction you would see in the capacity to from electrolyzers.
And one of the factors that will also help drive down cost is probably some technology sharing from the developed countries and the lessons learned from the developed countries that could come to Africa. So, Mr. Tariq Barar, I want to bring you into the conversation and get your perspective on how you see what's the current state of that sort of collaboration between developed and developing countries, and how do you like to, what are some of the steps probably Africa can take to advance that, to take it to the next stage?
Okay, thank you very much. I didn't translate what His Excellency said, but I guess the translator did his or her job. So, yeah, thank you for the question. So, Technip Energies were known to be a large EPC contractor, and today we're, for the last, I would say, 3 years, we've been heavily investing into the green hydrogen domain, and we are following the green hydrogen project all over the world. So today we see the first trend that we're seeing is the green hydrogen project that are currently being developed pre-FID or post-FID, mainly for mature industry in Europe, where, for example, refineries where there is a big need of hydrogen that is SMR based, and today there are a lot of push to go into more green hydrogen scheme in order to lower the carbon footprint of the refinery. And this, why I'm mentioning this, because this is exactly the lesson learned that will allow to have lower capex projects in Africa. So this is definitely something that for the African project that will come up a little bit later, will definitely have a lesson learned, a large scale, not large scale, but medium scale kind of projects that we could leverage those lessons learned into a huge mega project like in Mauritania and in Namibia, where we will be building, I don't know, something probably north of 10 to 20 gigawatts of capacity, electrolyzer capacity in such places. So I think the lesson learned would be from the existing current projects that are ongoing in terms of capex, in terms of technology, in terms of improving the state of the art of the electrolyzer.
Yeah, and definitely it needs hydrogen and other technologies like this are at early stage and needs an ecosystem to enable them to take it to the full potential. And Chin and Dickwell, I want to bring you into the conversation. Clearly, Africa Energy Chamber, by creating this Africa Energy Week and events like this, you're trying to bring participants from different parts of that value chain to create that ecosystem. Could you talk a little bit about like how you are enabling development of hydrogen and innovation with African Energy Chamber?
Absolutely. So I am from the African Energy Council. We're a sister organization to the African Energy Chamber. But yeah,
Apologies.
100% right. A forum like this aims to bring everyone across the entire value chain of hydrogen. I think that's the fundamental thing. If you listen to some of the comments that we've made, talking about renewable energy and seeing a learning curve, a cost decline going forward, electrolyzers seeing that as well. For us to get to that point of $2 per kilo, we need to have everyone around the table. Yes, renewable energy, solar is plummeting 90% over the last, 10, 15 years? Yes, that's true. Electrolyzers are plummeting down. But for us to actually maximize it and ensure that we get to $2 per kilo needs everyone around the table, including off-takers. And I think that's something that many people don't talk about so much. So yes, we talk about demand, hydrogen demand, it's in Europe. But how many times have we actually seen people sign an agreement to say, I am actually taking this hydrogen into the port of Hamburg or utilizing it for X, Y, and Z? So that's a huge aspect of the conversation that's usually missed out. But to your point, again, the other thing is, financiers. In Asia, we're starting to see very innovative ways of dealing or solving the equation. This is what they call now electrolyzer as a service. So instead of buying an electrolyzer in a development, they would actually lease it out almost like a subscription service. So there are lots of clever business models that needs to be integrated into the value chain. And for that to happen, it needs to be in a conversation like this, in a conference like this.
Totally. And let's stick for a little bit on this innovative business model and contract structure. I would like to ask probably Honorable Minister from South Africa, in terms of long-term contracts, what are the key challenges you're seeing with people willing to sign long-term contracts, and how you can probably help to de-risk some of the risks that they would be taking to enable them to sign those long-term contracts, because that could help scale up.
So, I mean, to the point I made earlier on, I think we have a thriving development finance institutions in the country, and they are reputable. They've built a significant amount of track record over a passage of time, and they've accumulated a lot of skills in understanding, interpreting, and participating in the complex financing projects. I'm talking about the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC, and the Development Bank of South Africa. So as part of our green hydrogen commercialization strategy, we have positioned these two DFIs to participate in ensuring that they are able to work with private developers to ensure that they de-risk the projects. So there's a facility that the two of them will put together, upwards of about 100 billion rands, to make sure that there's interest of essentially the sovereign in developing this sector. And of course, there's going to be significant recapitalization of this institution to make it possible that for them to participate in these initiatives. And then we also have a thriving commercial sector that has come to the fore. And one of the advantages that we have in South Africa is that there's, I think, a big pool of possibility in relation to a domestic market. So we have a big industry in the steel manufacturing and cement, and we know those are the hard to abate sectors, but they still have an interest of exporting into the markets that are are likely going to introduce the carbon border adjustment mechanism. So there's great value in them participating on the green hydrogen front, because for them it's also an existential question,
Right.
in addition to just being a commercial transaction. So in that we have a credible off-taker, significantly healthy balance sheet that can transact with a developer, and the state is also coming in to help to de-risk the project. So if you look at the matrix, is that this thing is doable. And the point we are making is that you must start, just make a start. You are going to face significant hurdles, but you must start. And in doing so, I think we're able to restore the credibility of the state and all the players in our claim that this is potential going into the
Yeah.
future.
And that call to action is very important, that we must start. Honorable Minister from Mauritania, you're talking about some of the challenges of, for hydrogen. What, in your mind, what are the one or two top challenges you see that we need to maybe remove in the next 3 to 5 years?
Je voudrais avant de répondre à, je voudrais avant de répondre à votre question, revenir un peu sur les usages pour l'hydrogène. Vous savez, nous sommes un pays minier. Nous avons actuellement une production minière, notamment de fer et d'or relativement importante. Et toutes ces mines sont exportées à l'état brut. Donc l'hydrogène est une opportunité pour nous pour créer de la valeur ajoutée sur les mines en exploitation, mais également pour l'exploitation d'autres gisements miniers qui sont existants. Les principaux, pour revenir à votre question, les principaux défis auxquels on fait face, naturellement, c'est l'accès aux mécanismes de financement, l'accès aux ressources. Et parce que nous avons, à la fois, comme vous savez, ça demande des ressources relativement importantes en termes d'investissement, mais aussi en termes d'investissement aussi bien dans l'infrastructure de l'hydrogène elle-même, mais aussi en termes d'investissement dans les infrastructures d'accompagnement. C'est le premier défi le plus important. Le deuxième défi, c'est naturellement, comme l'a dit mon collègue, c'est le développement des capacités, c'est-à-dire la formation, la maîtrise du process et toutes les connaissances qui sont autour par rapport à ça. Je pense que ce sont les deux principaux défis auxquels on fait face. L'accès aux mécanismes de financement pour aussi bien développer l'hydrogène, mais développer les infrastructures d'accompagnement et le développement des compétences et des capacités nationales en matière de maîtrise du processus et pour pouvoir réellement avoir des retombées en termes de contenu local par rapport à ces chantiers.
Yeah, and coming back, when financing and knowledge, those are the two key challenges you have identified. On the knowledge part, and coming back to Dr. Solomon, you were working in a research center. Um, you clearly you all are working on cutting edge technology. How do you take that cutting edge technology from the research labs then to the projects? And what would be the best effective way to coordinate between research centers and the industry?
Okay, so I think that for the African continent, it's very vital that we, while we have these discussions on ramping up or getting started with green hydrogen production, that also we at the same time start to build local capacity. We know that this is technology that we've not been working on, in a long time. So it's extremely very important that governments, that institutions have mechanisms to start to build up capacity, actually along the entire value chain, really from production, but also through to all the other byproducts that will come from the use of hydrogen. So I think that's key in terms of building up the base to support technology in the continent would be to start also really from now to train up young people, within the universities, but also in some hands-on activities. So for example, within our research center, we have started a specialized master's program, which we do across with the 15 countries of West Africa, where we try to somehow take the students through a specialized program, taking them through everything from production, but also utilization, really along the value chain. So I think it's important to see more of these activities so that we are really able to start to develop local capacity. Another thing that we have also done, and I think also that's very important, is to really connect from the very beginning with what's happening in the industry. So like has been said severally, whether it has to do with harvesting renewable energy, whether it has to do with development with electrolyzers, it's important that we are also part of this process. The truth is that, yes, we often say that technology is developed in Europe, but I think that technology you really cannot copy paste. So at some point we have to find ways to adapt to suit to our own local scenarios. Otherwise, then you have a situation where we copy and paste, and then we don't have exactly the same value that we expect because we do not adapt to our own local environment. So I think that partnership with industry, but also paying attention to our local contexts is also very key to making sure that what we do really fits to our own needs.
So adapting to local context and requirement are key. I want to come back to you, Mr. Brar. Same question for you. What are one or two top key challenges you see from the industry point of view that are big hurdles for hydrogen development?
Okay, I mean, from our point of view as engineering and I mean, assisting in developing such product. What we are, I would say today there's a lot of projects. Nevertheless, some countries to develop faster than others are the local added value from that green hydrogen. Typically in Mauritania, using the green hydrogen to do DRI and green steel is exactly, I think, the best way to begin kicking the first project until, of course, the full demand comes out and materialized in Europe and elsewhere in the world. The second part is definitely, we see it from more a technical side, and it's how we can wrap up the risks of the project. These are huge projects where there is a huge risk in terms of performance, of execution, of delivery. And in that regard, companies like Technip Energies are definitely, we think that we are key in delivering the package in order for this big investment to materialize as cash flow and as return and investment for the investor, but also for the countries where they are. So in that regard, we have set up some alliances with some electrolyzers OEM in order to give the full package in terms of performance guarantees. So that's a very key thing that we're trying to solve and deliver to the market.
Yeah. When project execution and commitment for offtake has to be absolutely critical. Mr. Dickwell, coming back to you, one of the challenge being identified is financing, and you talked about innovative business models as one solution. Are there other ways? What other ways you think we can sort of provide solution for financing especially in Africa?
Absolutely. So I'd respond to that question, but I was going to pick up something that the minister made, a comment he made. So he talked about the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM. You know, quite frankly, I think it's the biggest, I want to call it the biggest risk, actually, to much of African profits, whatever you want to call it. Because this month, there's a tax that will be imposed on key products, steel being one of them, aluminum being one of them. Any imports that go into Europe, you'll be charged a carbon tax, which is synonymous to as though you're operating within the European ETS. The reason why I say that is, a topic like that should dominate the agenda literally here, because we're talking about profitability. So it's such a big thing, and of course hydrogen comes into that. It's an enabler, help to carbon. Just make that comment. But I think in terms of financing and what can be done, I think there are many innovative things that we've seen. We've seen all kinds of partnerships. I think that's the big one, actually. Partnerships that are signed across the board. I've spoken about this across the value chain, whether you look at renewable energy, because itself, that's a whole industry itself. Renewable energy standalone is an industry. The nexus between renewable energy, then electrolyzers, that area, like he was describing, how do you package, how do you, for a country that's never had any technology on this scale, how do you package that as a solution, completely de-risk and present it to that country? It requires clever partnerships and understanding between, OEMs, but also renewable energy companies and all that. So I'd say partnership is, if you ask me, probably one of the biggest ones. But if I flip the script over and I talk about hydrogen itself, I think the issues we're having with hydrogen is that there's a massive overselling as well. And honestly, I think it's the biggest issue. Many of you would recognize, if you go back 2000, 2002, 2003, there was probably a similar hype about hydrogen at that time. Many people would recognize that. That hype came up and it went down. Now we're in the second cycle. I'm not saying this is hype at all. That's not the point, because there are many tangible things here. But I think the perception about hydrogen and what you would do and all the verticals that people say is there, and to his point there, when you actually look at what's committed, very little realization. So when we stop the overselling of hydrogen, I think a lot of finance will start to come in.
Yeah. So partnership, ecosystem, and a little bit less overselling. Coming back to you, Honorable Minister from South Africa, and I want to give you the last word here. You talked about creating manpower to help this hydrogen economy scale up in the next 20 years. Are you thinking of putting some specific policies in the universities, some collaboration between university, research center, and industry? Would you like to comment on any of that?
Well, I must say that on the domestic front, there's a lot that has been happening. So maybe just to dispel the myth that all of the learnings are going to come from the West. There are areas where we are far advanced. And I think that as Africans, we mustn't understate our potential and capacity. So if you come to South Africa, one of our marquee companies called Sasol, it's a state creation, but now it's in private hands. They're already sitting with that technology. As I speak to you, they're producing green hydrogen on industrial and commercial scale, and they've been doing it for years. So one of the best advantages we have is that we know the technology. So really it's about the fuel source. It has to be cleaner, and that's why we're able to move into that area. The second one is we have the Council for Science and Industrial Research. They've done tremendous amount of work on the issue of electrolyzers, far advanced than many industrialized Western countries. So what is the message I'm conveying? Is that we are not the recipient of technologies. We also have the capacity to do that. And I think it's important that we are able to surface our own capacity, share it with our sister countries, and so that as a continent, we are able to articulate and own the agenda and the narrative of what needs to happen. We are sitting with a renewable resource, so that we can't be displaced. Whether you like us or not, we are sitting with this. We are not about to export our resource by not beneficiating here at home. And that's why I said Africa's time has come. It's on our own terms. No one is going to dictate to us.
Yeah. And I cannot end the session at a better note than that Africa time has come. And there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the continent, and a big opportunity for Africa. So please join me in thanking the panel for the time and for the interesting discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Please kindly another round of applause for the panel. Thank you, honorable ministers, for setting